Take your Bibles and open to the Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon. Today we're beginning in chapter 5. Song of Solomon chapter 5. We're in a series on Sunday mornings, a series entitled What the Bible Says About Marriage, Love, and Sex. And we've been in this series. This is now the fourth sermon. And we find ourselves a little bit more than halfway through the Song of Solomon. And up to this point, we've seen that Solomon and his bride have just had a perfect run of it. Everything has been great. Everything's been wonderful. No problems, no issues, no stresses, no arguments, no fusses, no fights, just like your marriage, right? Right. I heard a couple of amens. So today we're coming, and I want to talk to you this subject. We're coming to Song of Solomon chapter 5, verse 2, all the way to chapter 6 and verse 10. And I want to talk to you about this subject, when a man loves a woman. When a man loves a woman. I almost asked Percy Sledge to be here today to sing that song for us. The king and his bride have really made their relationship look absolutely perfect. I mean, if we've studied, you've seen over and over again, everything is just wonderful. Everything's rosy. I mean, the bride has said things like this. The bride looks at her man and she says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. My beloved is to me as a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-Gedi. And everybody knows what that means. The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. Remember, he can jump small mountains in a single bound. My beloved is mine, and I am his. And the king has said to her in response, I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Guys, that might have been a compliment then, but don't call her a horse today. Remember? Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. He said, you're altogether beautiful, my love. You're perfect. There's no flaw in you. And chapter 4, verse 9, he has said, you've captivated my heart, my sister, my bride. You've captivated my heart with one glance of your eyes, just one look. So these two are enamored, absolutely infatuated with one another. I mean, it is all about their relationship and everything is going great. Remember, this is young love. We've been calling it honeymoon love, brand new. Everything is great. They're all goo-goo-eyed, lovey-dovey, and they've got these nicknames for each other. You know, she calls him the fruit basket and he calls her horse face, right? And they don't care. They call each other these nicknames in public and everybody's grossed out by their relationship, right? And they don't care because they're absolutely so much in love. But now, in chapter 5 and verse 2, we find something amazing, something interesting. You're going to be shocked to discover that this couple has a fight. This couple has a fight. Can you imagine a married couple fussing and fighting? But that's exactly what we see right here in the Bible. We begin to discover that marriages and relationships are not always perfect. And I know I see the shock on all of your faces here this morning. You're amazed to learn and to discover that might be a reality in your relationship. The couple who expected marriage to be perfect and life to never have any problems quickly realizes that they bump into problems. And, you know, I'll be honest this morning. I'm thankful that the Bible paints a realistic picture of their relationship. If everything was perfect with Solomon and his bride, we would probably be frustrated thinking, man, why isn't everything perfect in our relationships? But the Bible paints a very realistic picture that everything is not always perfect and that they have problems. And the reality is, and I'm going to shock you this morning, the reality is there are no perfect marriages, there are no perfect relationships, there are no perfect husbands, and there are no perfect wives. And the Bible teaches us several things here from the Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 2, all the way to chapter 6 and verse 10. Number one, I want you to learn from chapter 5, verse 2 to 7. It won't be perfect. Expect problems. It won't be perfect. Expect problems. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's profound, I believe absolutely essential if you're going to have a good marriage and a great relationship. Here it is, very simply. You need to learn how to manage your expectations in your marriage. Ladies, if you go in expecting your husband to meet every emotional need you have and carry you over the threshold every day, you are going to be sorely disappointed. And men, if you go in and you expect your wife to cook like mama and give your feet a rub and your back a rub every single day, trust me, that doesn't happen. You need to learn to manage your expectations. A lot of problems that marriages face are because our expectations are sky high and sometimes reality may be valley low. And sometimes reality may be really good, but because the expectations are so high, we're disappointed. Someone once said, when women marry, they think their husbands will change. When men marry, they think their wives never change. Both of them are wrong. You need to learn to manage your expectations. So this marriage recorded in the Bible faces some problems and some challenges, just like yours does, just like mine does. And this should encourage us. Don't get me wrong. We're not excited they had a fight. We're not grateful when some of our friends and have fusses and tiffs and spats in their marriage. But it helps us realize something. We are not alone. That everyone faces problems, that everyone encounters difficulties from time to time. The issue, listen carefully now, the issue is not if problems will come. The issue is how we manage the problems when they come our way. How do we respond? How do we act when we're disappointed, when our expectations are not met? Read chapter 5 and verse 2 and 3. The lady is speaking, the bride is speaking. She says, I slept, but my heart was awake. A sound, behold, my beloved knocking. He says, open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. And in verse 3, listen to what she says. I had put off my garment, how could I put it on? I had bathed my feet, how could I soil them? Now, what's happening here? This is a conflict in the relationship. I'm going to explain it so to be very clear. The bride is in bed somewhere between awake and dreaming, okay? She's almost asleep when her husband comes. And finally, after he's been out all night working hard, running the kingdom, Solomon comes home to his bride. And he wants to make tacos. Y'all remember that from the first week, right? He wants a pomegranate snack, all right? Her cheeks are like pomegranates. He's interested in his wife. But Solomon's been gone all night. And notice now, here's what he says. Open to me. He's knocking at the door. In those days, husbands and wives didn't share a room. They had separate bedrooms. What an awful idea, right? But they did. They had separate bedrooms. And so he's coming home. And this is what he says. He says, I've been working hard all day. I've been providing for my family. I've been running the kingdom. I've been bringing home the bacon. She is going to be so excited to see me when I get home. I bet that she's right there just watching a rerun of Golden Girls, waiting for me to come home. And this is what she's thinking. I waited all night on my man. He didn't call me. He didn't text me. He didn't let me know he was going to be late. For all I know, he could be in a car accident, dead on the side of the road. And he did not even let me know that he was working late tonight. And this is what she says. She says, I'd put off my garment. How could I put it on? In other words, she's already in bed, ready for bed, half asleep, and she's not interested in seeing her husband. Solomon approaches the door, and the door is locked. Get a clue, buddy, right? He knocks on the door. And he says, open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. Commentators tell us there is an intimate progression to these words. You see, ladies, when your husband comes to you and says, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one, he's not interested in playing Monopoly, all right? This is what's going on here in this relationship. And look at what she says in verse 3 again. I put off my garment. How could I put it back on? I bathed my feet. How could I soil them? I'm going to take a little bit of liberty with the text, okay? But here's what's happening. It's the Song of Solomon. Solomon says the three words that every lady loves to hear. Those three words. You still awake? Those are the three words. And she says the four words that every man hates. I have a headache. All right? That's what's going on here in this relationship between Solomon and his bride. And I want you to remember now, conflict often arises out of unmet expectations. She expected Solomon to be home at a certain time. The Bible says he's coming home about midnight because there's dew on the locks of his hair. He's been working hard running the kingdom. And if he was going to be late, she expected somehow he would let her know. But she didn't. She didn't know because he didn't let her know. And he expected that she would be so happy to see him. And she really wasn't. Notice what happens. These two just can't get it together. If you look at verses 5 to 7, finally, after he knocks, after he reaches for the latch, after she said, I'm sorry, I've got a headache, I'm not feeling good. Verse 5, what happens? I arose to open to my beloved. My hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the bolt. I opened to my beloved, but behold, my beloved had turned and gone. My soul failed me when I spoke. When he spoke, I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen found me as they went about in the city. They beat me. They bruised me. They took away my veil. Those watchmen of the walls. These verses indicate, now they just can't get it together. He's interested in seeing his wife. He knocks on the door. She says, good luck somewhere else, big man, not tonight. And then finally she feels pity. She feels remorse. I don't know. She just feels sorry for her husband. She opens the door and he's gone. Verse 7 is most likely figurative. Verse 7 is most likely figurative when it talks about the watchman grabbing her, beating her, stealing her veil. Most likely it refers to a guilty conscience. They've had a fight, they've had a fuss, and now she's feeling bad about how she responded to her husband. Most likely it's talking about the guilt she feels because of that relationship. There's no way the watchman would have dealt with the queen in that way in those days. You see, here's what's happening. Solomon and his bride have had a fight. Solomon and his bride had a fight over unmet expectations. And you and I need to come to realize one of the best things you can do for your marriage is to manage your expectations. I heard a story about a distraught man who brought his wife to see a pastor. And this lady, she was dazed almost. It was almost like she was just staring off into space. She was listless. She was completely unresponsive. For 30 minutes, the pastor sat there talking to her and talking to her husband and trying his best to get some kind of response out of this woman. She just sat there staring at the wall. Finally, the pastor got up, picked her up out of her seat, wrapped his arms around her, embraced her passionately, and gave her a big, sloppy kiss. The pastor looked at the husband and said, this is what she needs every single day. 3 times a day, all week long. The man looked back and said, but pastor, I can only bring her in on Thursdays. Listen to me, marriage is a gift from God. And you and I need to learn how to manage that gift. You and I need to learn how to expect problems and manage that conflict when it arises. You know, you may encounter conflict in your marriage. Here's a great example of how you should expect conflict and respond appropriately. Take a moment and watch this video.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just...
Don't!
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on?
If you've ever felt like that in communication, sometimes it can be difficult to communicate. You need to expect those problems and learn how to manage them. David Jeremiah says this about the passage. Timing can be pretty important. When he was willing, she was not. When she was willing, he was not there. It happens this way for couples sometimes. One gets frisky while the other gets a headache. One feels romantic while the other watches football. It can be difficult to get on the same page at the same time. Now listen carefully. She has twice commented that you should not awaken love before its time. She could now add that love shouldn't miss its moment. It can come too early. Often, it can come too late. Number one, it won't be perfect. Expect problems. Number two, it won't be perfect. Forgive quickly. It won't be perfect. Forgive quickly. Listen to me carefully. One of the worst things that you can do in your marriage is to carry a grudge and not forgive. One of the worst things you can do, and by the way, it's worse on you than it is on anyone else. When you carry a grudge, when you harbor bitterness, when you don't forgive, it's like a cancer inside of you. It's like a burden that you carry. It's like being imprisoned. Someone said that lack of forgiveness is like you drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. That is just not smart. And so when we don't forgive and carry a grudge, we ultimately grow bitter towards our mate. Dave Barry, a humorist, comedian, attempted to answer the question about what men and women want. Here's what he said. What women want. They want to be loved, listened to, desired, respected, to be needed, trusted, and sometimes just to be held. That's what women want. He said what men want. Tickets to the World Series. Or I would say maybe the Super Bowl. You see, sometimes you and I need to think about the needs of our mate, and we need to learn to forgive. In verse 8, she's looking for her man. That's what's going on. In verse 8, she gets up. She goes to try to find her husband. She feels guilty because of the fight. She wants to make it right. She can't find her husband. Verse 8, she's looking for her husband everywhere. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, tell him that I am sick with love. I am love sick. Verse 9, here she is. Look at what verse 9 says. These are the daughters of Jerusalem responding to her. What is your beloved more than any other beloved? O most beautiful among women. What is your beloved more than any other beloved, that you adjure us? She's talking to these ladies, the choir, the daughters of Jerusalem, and they're asking her a question. Okay, she comes to them and says, I want you to help me find my husband. And instead of them saying, okay, we'll help you find him, they say, what's the big deal about this guy? Why is your beloved more important, better, more special than any other beloved? In other words, to paraphrase it these days, hey, Wonder Woman, what's so big about your Superman, right? What is the deal with this guy? And the bride has clearly had a change of heart. She's clearly interested. And she answers their question in verses 10 to 16. We'll see that in a moment. But I want you to notice something very interesting. And I believe this is why the bride had a change of heart. Watch Solomon's response to her actions in the first few verses. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't get mad. What's his response? It is soft. It is tender. It is loving. His tenderness spoke to her and caused her to have a change of heart. Ultimately, this is what leads her to get up out of bed in verse 5. And it leads to her searching for him in verses 8 and 9. She responds to his kindness and tenderness. Do you know the Bible tells us that it is the kindness of God that leads us to repentance? Did you know that? The Bible tells us that God's kindness, His long-suffering, His mercy, and in your relationship, I bet typically when a soft answer is given in reply to a harsh word, that can diffuse the situation very quickly. But the reality is sometimes it's hard to respond with a soft answer. When somebody lobs one of those tennis balls over the net, you know what our instinct is? Oh, we're going to smash it right back, right? And then back and forth and back and forth. And ultimately, we need to learn what the Bible says in regard to that. A soft answer turns away wrath. Here she responds to his kindness. She says, marriage is not necessarily about the problems you're going to face, but how you manage those problems, how you encounter those problems, and how you love and live through those problems. You know, a few phrases that we need to learn to say and mean them. We need to learn to say, I was wrong. That is a hard one to say, isn't it? I was wrong. Because most of the time we don't think we're wrong. But you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're wrong, and I'm wrong, and we're all wrong from time to time. We need to learn to say, I was wrong. We need to learn to say, I'm sorry. Not just the sorry, but the I'm sorry. And we need to learn to follow that up with, will you forgive me? You see, sometimes we need to discover it's not about winning an argument, but about restoring a relationship and walking together toward the same path. Bob Turnbull, in his book, What Your Wife Really Needs, remind us guys that without certain things, your wife will dry up and die on the inside. Here's what he says, a few things that help your wife feel loved and appreciated. First of all, time. Time. The currency of the relationship is time. Clear space in your calendar for what she says is valuable to her. Time is important to your wife. Next, talk. How many of you are surprised at that, right? Talk. Conversation and communication. This is how she connects with you. It's also the way she handles stress. Ladies handle stress typically by talking about it. Men want to get up and go do something. We want to go walk away, want to run, want to do something to handle the stress. Ladies handle stress typically by talking. Not only that, time talk, tenderness. When you respond to her in a loving manner, even if she's had a hard day, or even if she's frustrated, it feeds her soul when she's nervous. She needs to be cherished. She knows she's cherished with tenderness. And then touch. And Turnbull says non-sexual affectionate touch is absolutely important. She needs to understand that when you give her a hug, or when you hold her hand, or when you put your arm around her, or when you push her hair back, that it doesn't always have to lead to something else, that you love her for who she is. Time, talk, tenderness, touch. Recognize how you respond to one another. Dr. James Dobson tells us a true story of some of his friends, and this is to illustrate the danger of responding in kind, of repaying evil for evil. One day, a wife got up and she had a special interview that day at her work. And she had her best dress, her favorite dress, laid out. And she came to her husband there as she was about to leave, and she turned around and she said, hey, could you zip this dress up for me? He said, absolutely. And he began to zip. Well, he began to joke like a lot of guys do, and he began to mess with the zipper. Zip, 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 up and down, up and down. And all of a sudden, the zipper broke. Her favorite dress. She'd had it dry cleaned. She knew she was wearing that to the interview that day. She was pretty upset. She wore a different dress, went off to work. She got back after her interview, 5:30 or so, and she saw her husband laying underneath the car doing some repairs to the vehicle. And you know what she thought? He messed with my zipper. I'm going to mess with his zipper. And that's what she did. She walked up as he's under the car, and she grabbed the zipper, zip, 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 walked into the house, laughing the whole way, ha, 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 opens the door, and there's her husband standing at the counter. She said, what are you doing in here? He said, what do you mean, what am I doing under here? You're under the car. No, I'm not under the car. That's Jerry, our next door neighbor. He's helping me fix the muffler. She said, I grabbed his zipper. He said, you did what? And they ran outside, and there's Jerry, knocked out cold under the car. He did what any red-blooded male would do when somebody grabs their zipper. He sat straight up under the car and knocked himself out. You see, you never know what's going to happen when you return evil for evil. Always return evil with good. Conflict arises in many areas of our marriage. Four main things that conflict, you'll find conflict. The checkbook. You can have conflict about the checkbook. You can have conflict about the bedroom. You can have conflict about the in-laws. And you can have conflict about communication. But I'm going to tell you this. Communication helps solve all those other areas. I tell couples when I counsel them, communication is the breath of every relationship. If you don't communicate, you suffocate. Now, there are a lot of things I say that aren't original to me, but I think I came up with that one. And I think it's profound for your marriage and for other relationships. Yes, you can fuss and fight about the checkbook, the bedroom, the in-laws, and how y'all talk to one another. But ultimately, if you talk about these things and have the goal of reconciliation, you can work them out and accomplish really amazing and incredible things. Kent Crockett said that forgiveness is the repair kit for marriage, but good communication prevents the damage from happening. Someone said, a good marriage is not made up of two perfect people. A good marriage is made up of two good forgivers. We need to learn to forgive. Number 3, it won't be perfect. Praise often. It won't be perfect. Praise often. So we see as we go through this text, first of all, it won't be perfect. Expect problems. It won't be perfect. Number 2, forgive quickly. And number 3, it won't be perfect. Praise often. If you're like most couples, when you were dating, you could see no flaw in the other. Then something happens when you get married. You put on a different pair of glasses. And if you talk to some couples these days, after they've been married a while, when they were dating, they couldn't see any problems. And now when they're married, all they can see are the problems. They can't see anything good. And so we need to learn to understand how important compliments, affirmation, and praise are to husbands and to wives. If you'll remember, she calls her husband my beloved. He calls his wife my love. And we'll walk through the text and see what they have to say about each other. Notice, first of all, she praises him. Chapter 5, verses 10 to 16. She's making up here, if you'll let me say it like that. She's found her husband, and now she wants him to know why she loves him so much. She praises him. Chapter 5, verses 10 to 16. Remember, the daughters of Jerusalem, what is your beloved more than any other beloved? Well, now she's going to give them the answer. Read with me, chapter 5, verse 10. My beloved is radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside streams of water, bathed in milk. I don't understand that. Sitting beside a full pool. His cheeks are like the beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. His lips are lilies dripping liquid myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with jewels. His body is polished ivory bedecked with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved. This is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. In other words, if you're asking me what's so great about my man, I want to tell you, and she begins to praise her husband. And I guess if he can say to her, your hair is like a flock of goats, she can say to him, your hair looks like a bunch of blackbirds. That's what she says. Right? So she's beginning to compliment him, and she tells him, your lips are dripping with liquid myrrh. Maybe that means he's drooling. I have no idea. She's telling these ladies, you have no idea how wonderful my husband is. And David Jeremiah walks through this text, and he says in verse 11, his hair is black and wavy. Verse 12, his eyes are brilliant and winsome. Verse 13, his cheeks are bearded and fragrant. Verse 13, his lips are bright and red. Verse 14, his arms are bronzed and strong. Verse 14 again, his stomach is built and chiseled. Look at it. His body is polished ivory bedeckled with sapphires. You know what she's saying? He's got a six-pack. He's still got his abs, even after a couple of years of marriage. His legs, verse 15, are big and powerful. His face is bold and handsome, verse 15. Verse 16, his mouth is beautiful and sweet. She's responding to the daughters of Jerusalem. She's praising her husband, and she praises him, but I want you to notice he praises her. Chapter 6 and verses 1 to 10. She found her beloved in his garden, and she's so grateful that she found him. You know what she says? I am my beloved, and he is mine. You know what she's saying? Yes, we had a fight. Yes, we had an argument. But it doesn't change my commitment to you. I'm yours, and you're mine. And see, this is the problem that we face a lot of times in marriages. When we fight, we don't fight fair. We use those words like always and never, and we use those really definitive terms. And sometimes if we're not careful, we'll begin to throw out all of the things, all the baggage. I mean, we load up the wagon and we let the dump truck fall and everything. See, ultimately what she's saying is this. I understand that we had some tension in our relationship, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm yours and you're mine. And that is a great word for you as a husband or you as a wife to hear. You need to understand that though tension may come, though fights or frustration, though the little things might get it to you after a while, ultimately you need to know, you need to commit, you need to be able to say after a fuss, after a fight, I want you to know I still love you and I'm committed to you. And that's what she says. I'm my beloved and he is mine. We're still committed to one another. We've had our difficulties, we've had our problems, but nothing changes the fact that we belong together. So in response, you know what he says? I can't believe you'd try to come here now. Why would you come here now and bother me? I wanted to see you a couple of hours ago, but you weren't interested. No, now you come and you're trying to sweet talk me. You're trying to compliment me. If you think you can sweet talk your way back into my good graces, you've got another thing coming. Is that what he said? No, not at all. You see, praise and affirmation should be a two-way street, and it is. She praises him. He praises her. What does he say? Now, you'll notice some of these lines are not new. You'd think that Solomon was wise enough to come up with some new lines for his wife, but these are the same lines he used in some other places. But you know what? I guess he thinks they worked one time. Maybe they'll work again. Chapter 6, verse 4. You're beautiful as Tisra, my love. Lovely as Jerusalem. Awesome as an army with banners. Listen to this one. This is good. Turn away your eyes from me, for they overwhelm me. Here we go. Your hair's like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes that have come up from washing. Remember, she's got them all. All of them bear twins. Not one of them has lost its young. Your cheeks are like the halves of pomegranate behind your veil. There's 60 queens and 80 concubines, virgins without number. In other words, all these women. But my dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, pure to her who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines also, they praised her. Who is this who looks like the dawn, beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun, awesome as an army with banners? Yes, he used some lines from his previous compliments, but he took some and went all the way with it. Amazing how he compliments her. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Turn your eyes away from me. Don't even look at me, because every time I see your eyes, I think I'm going to faint. My goodness, this guy was a romantic, wasn't he? And then, if you look at verse 8 and 9 again. There's 60 queens, 80 concubines, virgins without number. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, pure to her who bore her. In other words, Solomon's saying, I've seen all sorts of women in all sorts of places, but you are the only one for me. You are the only one so beautiful. He only has eyes for her. Now, I wonder if Solomon later in life would have said he wished he kept his advice when he was younger. As he looks back to the book of Ecclesiastes, you'll see he has many regrets regarding many things, and one of which is his relationship with women. Look at verse 10. Who is this who looks down like the dawn, beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun, awesome with army banners? You know what he's saying? Eugene Peterson has a paraphrase, and this is what he says. Has anyone ever seen anything like this? Dawn fresh, moon lovely, sun radiant, ravishing as the night sky with its galaxy of stars. Now, I might not, and you probably don't need to, look at your wife and say, you look like a horse, or you remind me of a billy goat. You probably don't need to say that. But you might want to memorize this one. You might want to memorize, you are dawn fresh, moon lovely, sun radiant, ravishing as the night sky with all of its galaxies. You might want to check out the podcast, get a CD, or write that down. Yeah, you can use that line right there. And that one about, hey, don't look at me, I'm going to faint, you're so beautiful. I mean, seriously, some good stuff. He's complimenting her. The doctor was talking to a woman one day about her husband. The woman had serious problems with her husband. He had some health issues. She brought him to the doctor, and here's what the doctor said. He has an abnormality in the center of his brain. It's in the center of what I call the emotional brain. That's what the doctor said. There's only one thing you can do for him. The only cure is unrestrained emotional support. The wife looked back at the doctor and said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Here's what you have to do. You have to fix his favorite meal and then greet him at the door with a hug. You need to thank him for working all day long, and then you sit him down. You rub his feet. You run him a bath. You shower him with hugs and kisses until he falls asleep. If you do that every day, I think your husband will live. The woman walked out of the meeting with the doctor and saw her husband. The husband said, what did the doctor say? Wife looked at her husband and said, sweetheart, the doctor says you're going to die. You need to learn to praise one another, to shower one another with compliments. And guys, we're almost finished. Guys, let me just say, one of the worst things that you can do is to insult your wife's appearance. You know that? It's one of the worst things you can do. And it's even worse when you insinuate things without really saying it. You know, like, how many points is that muffin anyway? Bad idea. Guess what I got you for your birthday? A brand new gym membership. Congratulations, you know. Not the best idea. And men, the rules are two. If you're ready for this, never, ever, ever say anything about her weight, and never, ever, ever assume a lady is pregnant. Ever, okay? Ever. You don't do that, all right? You need to be careful about how you deal with one another. And I want you to notice what happens here. Ultimately, this is what ought to happen in every godly relationship. Yes, they had a fuss. Yes, they had a fight. Yes, there were problems. But ultimately, they come back to the point where their commitment is bigger than their problems. Where their devotion to one another is greater than anything else that they faced. And see, this is a lesson for you and for me and for all of us, ultimately in our relationship with God, but also in our relationship with one another. You see, ultimately, no matter what life brings your way, no matter any curveballs or valleys or problems, we ought to be able to say, my devotion to God, there's nothing that I face in this life that's going to shake my commitment to Him. And then we ought to be able to say, as we look at our relationship with our spouses, fiancés, we ought to be able to say, no matter what we face and the problems that we encounter, we're going to stand strong and we're going to stay committed and we're going to stay devoted. I am my beloved and he is mine. Your marriage is not going to be perfect. You need to know that. You need to understand that. But you should know, marriage ultimately demands even greater, it's great work, lots of work, but it brings great rewards. I'm going to ask you